I have to say it's hard to make a judgment call as to whether Trump will be softly with Russia all the way through. We, Only time will tell on that, because Trump does have a bit of a temper, and his patience could run out with Putin.
Okay, David, let's start by sort of going inside what's going on at the White House at the moment before this phone call with Vladimir Putin. How much preparation do you imagine Donald Trump is doing? Will they have strategic meetings on sort of tactics and how to respond if Putin says X, Y, or Z? Or is he the type that just sort of wings this kind of thing?
No, I think this one is a bit more serious than just winging it for Trump. I don't deny that it may seem that he does that, but do you know what? Among his staff, certainly, a fantastic amount of preparation is going into this call between Trump and President Putin. It's been a matter of building up through meetings in Saudi Arabia with Secretary of State Rubio and the Foreign Affairs Minister of Russia, Lavrov. And of course, Trump sent his negotiating envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Moscow, who actually met President Putin last week to sort of smooth the way, set out the terms of the deal as Ukraine has accepted and signed up to for this 30-day ceasefire proposal. So an awful lot of groundwork has been done. And Trump is very well across this particular topic, because it's something that he gives the highest priority to, well, on the one hand, his reputation and ability as a negotiator. Don't forget, he came to prominence in America as the co-author of The Art of the Deal, and then on American TV as the big boss on The Apprentice, being very decisive and able to spot a good deal maker. So he sets a lot of store by that reputation, but also by his standing on the world stage as a tough leader of his country, of equal, if not greater stature than any other world leader. So he likes to play on the same stage as President Xi of China, of course, and President Putin of Russia, other strong leaders. That's the company that Trump sees himself in, and sees himself really as the first among equals, if you like, in that company.
On that basis, then, what does Trump want to be able to tell the world after this call? What's his ideal, and what do you think he is expecting himself, realistically?
So the ideal outcome is continued progress towards Russia joining in a ceasefire. That's going to be tricky, because we know that there are numerous Russian demands which at the moment are apparently unacceptable to Ukraine, and are causing a bit of a blockage on progress. So Trump wants to keep the momentum going. Trump in recent days has been managing expectations a bit by not only saying, I think we've got a very good chance, but also saying, well, we want to see if we can bring the war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So he's trying to manage expectations, knowing, as his team does, that Putin is a tough customer, very unpredictable, but also deep down wants really to control the whole of Ukraine. That was his original war aim. And so can they reach a realistic permanent peace, a permanent truce that Putin is really going to sign up to, when deep down they know that the Russians would rather have the control of the whole country, that they, at the moment, they occupy about 1/5 of Ukraine. And Trump says that the negotiations right at this time are focused on control over certain bits of territory and certain assets, like the very big nuclear power station that Russia occupies right on the front line.
David, after the infamous Oval Office row with Volodymyr Zelensky, Donald Trump sort of went on the attack, didn't he, and said, look, we're effectively not going to deal with you until you come back to the table effectively more in line with the way that I'm thinking. Trump was obviously satisfied with the terms of this ceasefire because that was agreed with Ukraine, wasn't it, in Saudi? But now Putin has refused those terms. Trump doesn't seem to have kind of hit out against Russia in the same way. Do you think that's sort of part of his tactics? Or does he actually really want to just be blaming Ukraine? Is that what Trump prefers to do?
Well, Trump certainly sees a power imbalance, and he's made that pretty plain between Ukraine and Russia and the leaders of Ukraine and Russia. And there's no doubt about who he regards as holding all the cards, because he's actually said so in public. He's told Zelensky, you don't hold any cards. And he's said in the same breath, Russia holds all the cards. So he's already been talking about this power imbalance. And so what your assessment of that boils down to is is Trump really letting the cat out of the bag on his own sympathies? Well, yes, I suppose so. But is he really stating the realistic situation on the ground? Well, arguably, I guess he is. It doesn't seem like a very good negotiating tactic by the person who's supposed to hold the ring between them. But all around Trump, his people say, you have to trust him because he's the master deal maker. And when people rush to judge Trump and say he's already siding with Putin, he's only going to present a peace to Ukraine that's one-sided, and then he's just going to blame Ukraine if it doesn't work. Well, he has put out a couple of times this year a threat to ratchet up the economic pressure on Russia. Believe it or not, there are still things that America can do to apply pressure to Russia. I think Trump and his team have decided not to go very hard in public on Russia at this stage, and I have to say it's hard to make a judgment call as to whether Trump will be softly with Russia all the way through. Only time will tell on that, because Trump does have a bit of a temper, and his patience could run out with Putin. That said, we know he respects Putin, and even said in the White House, in the Oval Office, Trump basically said in the White House, in the Oval Office, that Putin has been through a lot with him because of all the attacks on him over his first impeachment, about aligning himself with Russia during the 2016 election. And that did betray, I think, a certain sympathy and empathy with Putin that raised alarm bells around the place. But that said, Trump also has his eye on a bigger prize. He genuinely thinks that he deserves, and he would deserve, a Nobel Peace Prize if he can bring something like a reasonable truce and peace to Ukraine. So that said, Trump really does believe that he can get a Nobel Peace Prize for bringing a permanent ceasefire and truce to Ukraine. So that is partly on his mind. And so they won't simply, I think, try and steamroller Zelensky into any old peace deal. They've got Ukraine signed up to an agreement. So the skillful bit, the test comes now. How can they coax Putin into at least a ceasefire, at least a cessation of the killing, which is the first step towards a potential lasting truce? And that's really what Trump wants to see from this phone call. He wants to see a pathway to at least a ceasefire. But bear in mind that we've gone from Trump's campaign rhetoric of I'll sort out that war and end it in one day, to the current position is they're hopeful of bringing Russia to a ceasefire within weeks. That's what Witkoff said last week.
Some people, David, have sort of made the point that Putin's really just playing at this situation, and of course, therefore, playing Trump to his own advantage. You've said it there. Ideally, I guess he would like to drag on the ceasefire negotiations, so he can either really, in the end, keep fighting, or that any final deal actually improves for him. Do you think anyone in Trump's inner circle is making that point to him, saying you are being played here and you're looking weaker, perhaps, even in the eyes of the sort of global community? And would he ever listen to that?
There are one or two voices that can get through to Trump to make that kind of point that he's simply being played by Putin. I don't actually think Trump's ego would allow him to even consider that as a possibility seriously, because Trump is the kind of negotiator who likes to think he's got most of the cards and that he's got the upper hand. But there are one or two people like Lindsey Graham, who's a senator who's not in the administration, but he's close to Trump. He does play golf with Trump, and he's been a long-standing advocate for Ukraine, although he has pretty much abandoned Zelensky after the Oval Office bust-up. Lindsey Graham is perhaps one of the few voices in the Trump inner circle who can get through and put the kind of point that you're suggesting, that do you know what? There's another side to this. Putin's just stringing you along. That's also the role of allies like Britain, and of course, Sir Keir Starmer has also said recently, Putin's just dragging his feet. And so that kind of comment at that level, I think, will filter its way through to Trump. So at least there's a chance of him hearing it. Whether he would accept it is another matter.
And just one final one. We do have an idea of what Trump plans to talk to Putin about, because he said it. They're going to discuss division of Ukraine's land and power stations. Do you think for Trump there is any part of Russian-occupied Ukraine land or power stations that he would say, do you know what, I'm not prepared to give that up to you? It's one thing for him to say it, of course, another for Ukraine to agree to it. But is there any bit where he would go, that is sacred enough to Ukraine that Putin, no, you can't have that bit?
Well, all we've got to go on at the moment is that members of Trump's team and Trump himself have said that a final agreement, I think I'm thinking more of Marco Rubio now, actually, the Secretary of State, a final agreement does involve concessions on all sides. And that obviously has to be the starting point of, if you like, real talks, when there are actually people from Ukraine and Russia in the same room, which of course hasn't happened yet. And so that's going to have to be in the following steps. What the Trump administration wants initially is to get a ceasefire, because they do believe, and this may be mistaken, but they believe that once the fighting has stopped, the bombing has stopped, that it won't restart. Now, of course, there will be circumstances where it absolutely could restart. And you're seeing, as you point out, Putin does want to take advantage of this period where he feels like he's got the upper hand in ending the Kursk incursion by Ukraine. He would very much like to expel the Ukrainian army from Kursk, which is part of Russia that they've occupied. I think it's unlikely that there's going to be, at this moment, a decision from the Trump side that they will go into bat for certain chunks of territory. And we've seen various Trump officials dismissing the idea, for example, that there can be any return to 2014 borders, meaning that Crimea can be part of this discussion in this peace process. We'll have to see, because the Trump team do want to get a peace deal. Having said that, how do I want to wrap this up? The Trump team do want to get a peace deal, but I think they're in danger of ending up with a frozen conflict and a kind of peace that is never quite concluded, and yet the yeah, oh, that's the way to do it, isn't it? Hold on a second. The Trump team do want a peace deal. I think we're just in danger here of ending up with a frozen conflict, as Russia does indeed drag its feet for perhaps years until Trump is no longer president.